Good morning, everyone. I hope you had a fun week last week, finishing up our nonfiction reading and writing. You did amazing jobs on your projects. I loved reading all of them. Amazing work on the pictures and the facts you found. Fantastic. This week we're going to change to looking at a different genre of books, and we're going to start for the next couple weeks looking at fairy tales. So if we take a look at our book this week, there are 3 words in the title. Who can read one of the words or the whole title? And Mrs. Burke always says, look at the front cover. It helps you figure out what the story is going to be about. I see a little girl wearing a red dress who is carrying a basket, picking some flowers, and she's in an area where there are trees. And if you look very closely, I can see a wolf and a squirrel looking at the little girl. So, who can read the title of our story this week? That's right, Red Riding Hood. I want you to use your schema now and tell me, what do you already know about Red Riding Hood? I'm sure some of you have read the story before, or heard the story, or seen the story on a video. What happens in Red Riding Hood? Well, let's find out. Once upon a time, there lived a little girl who always wore a bright red cape with a hood. She was known as Little Red Riding Hood. She lived with her mother in a cottage near the woods, and on the other side of the woods lived her grandmother. And remember, why am I using my pointing finger to read? Remember, you should always be using your reading finger to point to the words. It helps us read. One day, Little Red Riding Hood's mother said, "Grandmother is not feeling well, so I have baked some bread for you to take to her. Just remember, be careful to stay on the path. You know you must never go into the woods." And if you look very closely, what I just read, is in a different color. And it's in a different color because this character, Red Riding Hood's mother, is speaking. It is called a quote. And what I just read is in some quotations because this character is speaking. Little Red Riding Hood set off happily, and at first she was very careful. But soon she noticed some lovely flowers growing nearby, and she stepped from the path to pick them for her grandmother. She gathered more and more flowers, and before she knew it, she had wandered deep into the woods. She could not see the path at all. Just then a wolf stepped out from behind a tree. "Good day, my dear," he said. "And where are you going?" "I am going to my sick grandmother on the other side of the woods," replied Little Red Riding Hood. "I stopped to pick these flowers for her, and now I'm lost." And remember, I knew to change my voice because of the different colors in the writing. The author of this story really helped me know that the characters in the story, were speaking. Let me show you the way," said the wolf. "Oh, thank you," said Little Red Riding Hood, and she followed the wolf back to the path. But the wolf had a wicked plan. While Little Red Riding Hood walked along the path, he ran through the woods so that he would get to grandmother's first. What is his plan? I want you to think right now. What do you predict his plan is going to be. The wolf knocked on the door. "Who is it?" called Grandmother. "It's me, Little Red Riding Hood," answered the wolf in a little voice. "I've come to visit you." But it's not really Little Red Riding Hood. It's the wolf pretending to be Little Red Riding Hood. "How sweet of you," Grandmother replied. "Please come in, my dear." The wolf opened the door and pounced. He grabbed Grandmother and locked her in the closet. At that moment, he heard Little Red Riding Hood outside. Wrapping a scarf around his head, he jumped into bed and pulled the covers right up to his whiskery chin. Little Red Riding Hood knocked on the door. "Grandmother," she called, "it's me, Little Red Riding Hood. I've come to visit you." "How sweet of you," the wolf replied in a voice like Grandmother's, or he's trying to be like Grandmother. "Please come in, my dear." Little Red Riding Hood opened the door and stepped inside. "Hello, my dear child," said the wolf. "Come and sit by my bed." What do you think Red Riding Hood is thinking right now? Does she believe him? But as Little Red Riding Hood came closer, she began to stare. "Oh, Grandmother," she said, "what big ears you have." "All the better to hear you with, my dear," replied the wolf. "Oh, Grandmother, what big eyes you have." "All the better to see you with, my dear." Then Little Red Riding Hood looked even more closely. "But Grandmother, what big teeth you have." "All the better to eat you with, my dear," said the wolf, and he leaped out of bed to grab her. "Help, help," cried Little Red Riding Hood as she ran out of the cottage with the wolf close behind her. A woodcutter heard her cries and ran toward the cottage. What's the wolfcutter going to do? The wolf stopped, looked at the woodcutter, and then fled into the woods. Why do you think the wolf ran away? Together, Little Red Riding Hood and the woodcutter found Grandmother and set her free. From that day on, Grandmother was much more careful about who she invited in, and you can be sure that Little Red Riding Hood always did stay on the path. And how do you think the wolf is feeling right now at the end of the story? How do you think Red Riding Hood is feeling at the end of the story? What kind of lesson did Little Red Riding Hood learn? Okay, so I want you to tell me right now, when we read fairy tales, there are always characters and there's always a setting in the story. So who are the characters in the story? Yes, Red Riding Hood is what we call the main character in the story. She is in every part of the story. The story happens around her. We also have Grandmother the wolf, and mother. On the front cover, we had the little squirrel looking at Red Riding Hood. But was the squirrel a character in the story? No, he was just a picture in the story because she was in the woods and squirrels are found in the woods. Remember that characters have to speak or do things in the story to be a character. Now, let's move to the setting. The setting of the story is where the story takes place. There could be lots of different settings in a story. And our story takes place where? You're right, in the forest, in the woods. That's the main setting of the story, but there are two other parts of the story that the setting is, and it starts in Red Riding Hood's house. And also grandmother's house. But the main setting of the story is definitely the woods. Because even when we're in Red Riding Hood's house and in grandmother's house, we are still in the woods because their houses are in the woods. So this week you're going to do a digital slides about characters and setting, and then write some sentences about the main character, Red Riding Hood. She's the main character, and I want you to write some sentences about her. Sentences about maybe what she does in the story, sentences about her as a character, and sentences about what she looks like. So have fun. Can't wait to read your work when you're done. Have fun.